This is Mayor Bill Hudnut at shortly after 4 o'clock in the morning, declaring a snow emergency in the city of Indianapolis. I have no alternative in view of the terrifically high winds and the savage drifts that are occurring that are stalling our efforts to remove snow from the streets.
Well, we've declared a snow emergency, and that isn't anything like martial law. It just simply means motorists and people, please stay off the highways and stay in for your own safety.
First the barometer dropped, then the temperature, and then came the snow and the wind. When the history books are written, it will be recorded as one of the worst winter storms to ever cross our borders. But history books are for the future. Today, we're still feeling the immediate effects of the blizzard of 1978.
The Indiana blizzard of 1978, a Channel 8 News special report with Mike Ahern, Stan Wood, Gene Lively, Carol Krause, and the entire Channel 8 News team.
Good evening, and if we all seem to be rather relaxed here tonight, it is because we are, in fact, relaxing. Many of us for the first time in the last week or so, a chance to reflect on the blizzard of 78. And we are all here, the news team on the set this evening, but I suppose if there is one outstanding hero, it would be this truck behind me here, the Channel 8 Live Eye truck. If you could pay it overtime, I think it would be very wealthy along about now. Well, the National Weather Service was, in fact, right on the money. It was a blizzard in the truest sense of the word. For 67 hours, Channel 8 News stayed with the storm, bringing live reports all through the night.
Tonight we'll recap what brought that storm to us and show you how it affected Indianapolis as well as the entire state of Indiana.
And with us this evening are all the Channel 8 reporters who, despite the cold and the danger, went out to record on videotape the blizzard's devastating effects.
The first hint on just how right the National Weather Service was came around 10 p.m. as the winds really began to pick up. Just about that time, we dispatched Josh Littman on two missions. One, to find transportation for the news teams, and two, to record the storm as it arrived.
Thank you, Carol. It certainly wasn't easy, but on Wednesday evening, we asked for and we received the loan of a four-wheel drive Jeep from Northside AMC. Within just a few hours, we would have learned just how important that loan was. It was the only way to get around. The snow and high winds blew in with a fury that Indiana residents rarely see. Travel on the roads we know so well was suddenly impossible. Many of the roads just simply disappeared under waves of drifting snow. As the four-wheel drive Jeeps shifted into low, the National Guard at Stout Field shifted into high, the best they could. The Guard opened armories and radio contact with outlying areas of the state. We were all outlying areas. Soon they began concentrating on life-and-death rescues. Those rescues included the use of an Army anti-tank personnel carrier, a state trooper and Marion County Sheriff's deputy aboard, checking seemingly abandoned cars for helpless victims of the weather.
An awful lot of people are stranded. The cars everywhere. They just can't negotiate the streets. There's just too much snow. Very dangerous situation.
Where are you taking them?
The nearest fire stations, gas stations, any kind of open establishment where we can keep them warm.
By dawn, the snow had not let up. There were still hours to go. The rush hour did not exist. It couldn't. Downtown Indianapolis at 9 a.m. was a ghost town, as if the snow had been the plague, and myself and photographer Steve Schweitzer, the only survivors.
Coming up next, Stan Wood scores the first round in a match with the big storm, and reports from Bruce Childs, Carol Krause, Brian Dampier, and Tim Fritz.
The Indiana blizzard of 1978, brought to you in part by your pharmacist in green at your neighborhood Hook's Dependable Drugstore.
Meet my weekend hotshots. The big fella just turned 40, and to celebrate, he plays basketball for the first time in years. Let's see. Some hooks to you, some aspirin for your headache, and some rubbing lotion for your aching back. And Mr. Athlete plays football with his girlfriend, and presto, sprained ankle. So from hooks to you, an ace bandage and a new football. And the little lady decides not to wear a jacket all day and gets a real fine cold. So for you, just what the doctor ordered. Hooks has all the health aids an active bunch like this needs. Plus, they carry my favorite bath powder. And believe me, after taking care of this gang all day, I'm going to need a long, hot bath.
If it's important to your family's health, it's important to Hooks.
Well, when daylight arrived and Indiana awoke, the blowing snow and the cold were still with us. And looking out our windows, we saw 3- and 4-foot-high snowdrifts like frozen white tidal waves. It was Channel 8's Stan Wood here who first realized exactly how severe the storm was going to be. And Stan, I'll have to say that I was not among one of the believers about Wednesday afternoon when there was just rain falling and very little snow yet.
There were a few skeptics at the beginning, but we took care of that pretty quickly. The National Weather Service Forecast Office at Indianapolis International Airport sized up that developing storm as a full-blown major threat. And at 3:45 p.m. Wednesday afternoon, January 25th, Channel 8 viewers received exclusively the very first blizzard warning broadcast direct from the National Weather Service office. Channel 8 immediately went into its severe weather mode of operation with our exclusive constant blizzard warning symbol displayed in the lower right-hand corner of the TV screen to alert late tuners in to the impending weather emergency. At 4:20 p.m., I was on the air live from our weather studio with Channel 8's exclusive Rainbow Radar to give you a first-hand look at the snow shield as it began to move into west-central Indiana. We then initiated a series of blizzard warning messages electronically moved across the bottom of the TV screen. These update alerts at 4:24, 4:46, and 5:19 p.m. gave you viewers additional travel information and precautionary advice. And by that time, our reporters were beginning to assemble their earmuffs and their tall boots. Right, Gene?
Right. And as the first morning crews did begin to arrive, we immediately sent them right back out into the cold. Bruce Childs, along with Chief Photographer Tom Small, spent some time getting the crews ready, then others. Bruce has this report.
Absolutely rotten. That's the best way to describe the streets in and around Indianapolis on Thursday. Gusting winds up to 50 miles per hour blocked streets with drifts 4 feet high in the city and in some rural places up to 7 feet deep. They also kept cleanup crews from working at all. Police cars became mired in snowbanks, and many of the emergency food, fuel, and medical runs were made by volunteers in four-wheel drive vehicles. In the city, most people did not venture out on the streets. The watchword, stay home. And with all downtown businesses closed, the central city looked like a ghost town. On the interstates, many were stranded. Truck drivers urged into the storm by companies got caught axle deep in snow on ramps or off to the side of the road. And on a ramp, if one driver got stuck, everybody else behind him was held up as well. 68 National Guard armories opened across the state to care for stranded motorists.
By Friday, the winds had died down, and the work crews were able to get out and start digging out the city. But it's probably still going to be next week before everything gets cleared up and traffic gets back to normal. Carol.
Bruce, the obvious question is, how did you and photographer Tom Small manage to get around when everybody else was getting stuck?
Well, while we were out, we were in the live eye trucks, and that has a lot of weight in the back and a lot of gear, and that gave us something to move with. Once we got going, we had a lot of mass behind us and just barreled our way through the snowdrift.
You were the lucky reporters to be in that truck. Well, it was basically the same story at the airport. Instead of no driving, it was no flying. Not even the heavy snow removal equipment there could keep up with the fierce winds.
Visibility was close to zero at the blizzard's peak. Airport officials decided not to even attempt to clear the runways until the snow and wind stopped on Friday. Inside, 200 stranded passengers tried to make the best of a bad situation.
And then they sent our plane up to Fort Wayne to get some people. When it came back, it couldn't land by then. So it circled a while and went on, and here we stayed all night.
Some even volunteered to work in the coffee shop kitchen, helping with food preparation where regular employees could not make it into work. More importantly, it gave them something to do, penned up inside the terminal. Stranded bus and car travelers found a home at the Red Cross, which gave shelter to over 200 people, twice its capacity.
Stan, we've had lots of snow before. What is it about a blizzard specifically that makes it so fierce and so dangerous?
Well, of course, it's the combination of heavy snowfall and extreme wind condition. Meteorologically, let's look it right in the eye now. As that monster low-pressure center of the storm moved slowly northward from western Tennessee to west-central Ohio, barometer readings near the center fell to all-time record lows. Cleveland reported 28.28 inches of mercury, a graphic clue to the storm's intensity. By Wednesday midnight, I had assessed the snowfall rate at about 1 inch per hour, and we were already receiving wind gusts above 40 miles per hour. The storm gained a further punch as an Arctic cold front pushed in through the Hoosier State from the west during the early Thursday morning hours. And then as the temperatures plummeted, the wind chill factor went to -40 and below. At this point, I characterized the storm on one of our live cut-ins as a killer storm. And sadly, it turned out to be exactly that. Channel 8 offered its viewers blizzard safety tips and what to do if the storm actually trapped you in a vehicle. Throughout the early morning hours, we cut into our all-night blizzard movie special with the latest weather and survival information. It was quite a night, wasn't it, Mike? We spent a little time outdoors together there in front of the studio so we could sample it firsthand, but I think the rest of the people here got a little more than we did of it outdoors.
That's true. I think you could almost see the intensity of the storm build. Each time we went outside, every half hour or so, the wind had increased a little more and the drifts were a little higher just outside our front door there.
And by 2 a.m., there wasn't a skeptic in the house.
No, not around here anyway. Here at Channel 8, the studios, the staff did find a temporary home and the floors and wherever they could, couches around the building. In the newsroom, assignment editor Tom Gray fought the battle of what stories to cover and how to get there. Of course, it was becoming obvious that there could grow out of this storm a shortage of food, shortage of medicine, emergency services that were overtaxed. We have two reports on that tonight, Brian Dampier and Tim Fritz.
It looked as though food would be in short supply in Marion County. When the blizzard hit, it closed 90% of the grocery stores here. That meant the 25 groceries open for business, most for limited hours, were swamped with customers. Basics such as milk, eggs, bread, and toilet paper were quickly bought out. Some shoppers began hoarding. At one store, buyers reportedly were picking up 8 to 10 loaves of bread at a time. Residents braved the harsh weather on snowmobiles and skis, one to buy a gallon of ice cream. When the winds died down, most grocery stores reopened, and most Indianapolis residents spent the weekend indoors, well-stocked and well-fed.
The interstates are now open and the trucks have begun rolling again. Most Indianapolis food stores report fresh supplies are coming in. But for the police and fire departments, it was another story, and with that, here's Tim Fritz.
Thank you, Brian. The blizzard of 1978 turned out to be especially trying for Indianapolis area emergency service. Even with all those warnings given out by Channel 8, just about everybody was caught with their snow tires flat.
Indianapolis police officers were forced into 12-hour shifts attempting to patrol the streets in cars with no snow tires. Police called for and got volunteer help from local citizens in four-wheel drive vehicles. Some looting was reported on Thursday and Friday nights, but it never got out of control. Ambulances moved at a snail's pace across Marion County roads, and local hospitals were taxed to the limits by lack of personnel. Some hospital employees worked double and triple shifts, and visitors were even pressed into service. Indianapolis firefighters fought a number of minor blazes, and that could be the biggest blessing of the blizzard. No major fires developed as those devastating winds raked across central Indiana.
Well, in the course of the day, we did manage to lose 2 news units to the snow drifts, units that we did without on Friday. Coming up next, reports from Lori Roberts, Janice Sharp, and Denise Calloway.
Wake up, dear. Breakfast will be ready in about 15 minutes. Happy anniversary.
Anniversary?
When you're in a hurry, isn't it nice to know there's a Hooks drugstore just around the corner, where you can get just about anything and everything you need without spending a lot of time you don't have? At Hooks, we take great care to make sure that whatever you need is easy to find, and whatever you find is just what you need. Hooks, when you really need a drugstore.
Happy anniversary.
You're wonderful.
I know.
Well, on Friday morning, the winds let up, the sun finally came out. It was good to see that again. Indianapolis began to look like a city once again. A city on the crawl nonetheless, but people did begin to emerge from their blizzard hideaways wherever they were. But there was still an official snow emergency in town, and many residents were still relying on the National Guard and the Army. We have 2 reports on that now from Janice Sharp and Lori Roberts. Lori?
Mike, it was helicopters, jeeps, and armored personnel carriers, all in khaki green, that joined the rescue and the dig-out movement as the Indiana National Guard mobilized more of its forces. They joined the efforts late Wednesday night.
As the blizzard of 1978 was roaring into Indiana, the Indiana National Guard began activating its Emergency Operations Center at Guard headquarters in Stout Field. From here, Major General Alfred Honor directed the operations of all 68 Guard armories in Indiana and the mobilization of over 2,500 Guardsmen. Their main priority, mercy missions. First life-saving, then medical emergencies, heart attacks, women in labor. Guardsmen then rescued the stranded, like the Westfall family from rural Salem in Washington County.
They sent a snowplow out and we followed them in. They broke the drift so we could get in.
Why did you have to come here to the armory?
Because we ran out of fuel and food.
Guardsmen also cleared interstates and country roads, using armored personnel carriers to break through high drifts. But finally, by Monday night, after helping over 5,000 refugees, only 6 armories were still open, with 38 refugees left. But there also was a food emergency. Jenna Sharp reports.
The blizzard left many Indianapolis residents stranded in their homes without food. The helpline, sponsored by the Community Service Council, was designated as a clearinghouse for people with food-related needs. Of 1,500 such inquiries, about 50 of those determined by the helpline to be the most serious had food delivered to their doors by the U.S. Army Reserves. That food was collected during the United Way Can Do food drive and had been stored at the Center Township Trustee's office for emergency situations.
The helpline's work did not stop when the blizzard ended. The agency is continuing to take storm-related calls during its regular hours. If you have a problem, call them at 634-HELP. Gene?
Thank you, Janice and Lori. Here in Indiana alone, more than 32,000 miles of highways were closed by the snow, and President Carter declared Indiana, along with Ohio and Michigan, areas eligible for federal disaster money. But as Denise Calloway reports, it certainly does not ease the pain of being away from home with nowhere or no way to go.
Gene, that was probably the worst thing for most people, being stranded away from home. And while some people had little or no trouble finding temporary shelter, others were not so lucky. In West Central Indiana, on Amtrak's Floridian train, the crew and passengers of the Florida-bound train huddled under blankets for 12 hours before volunteers helped dig them out and take them to Bainbridge. By Sunday, they had all been moved to a hotel in Indianapolis, many of them deciding to return home instead of continuing on to Florida. The stranded travelers said the incident made them feel like one big happy family, but it's not an experience they'd like to go through again.
Well, of course, the storm has many dimensions, and among those, I think a chance to, not only for us to reflect on what happened the last several days, Mayor Hudnut as well. It's been a very busy few days. I don't know if the mayor ever got much sleep, Gene, but you talked to him today about,
yeah, I did talk to him
about what he thought we did right, that is the city of Indianapolis, and what possibly it could do again.
Well, the first thing he told me, Mike, was it's hard to say. But he did say that the coordination of the whole effort was sort of ad hoc planning, and the situation next time may be entirely different. But in retrospect, he thinks and feels that the city did a good job as well as it could under the circumstances. He said that if he knew that this type of weather were going to happen again next year, that he would gravely encourage additional equipment be bought by the city and by the state. But he said that a blizzard such as this one comes along once in every 30 years, that it would sort of be a waste of city tax dollars to buy all that equipment for it to sit out there and not be used. He said it's a sporadic problem, but it would be wasteful, that he would rather contract the work out when you have a bad storm like this, which he did. But he also said one effort that they feel like they could improve on was the use of four-wheel vehicles. I think, Carol, Police Chief Gallagher had something to say about that.
That's right. I think if any one item was the most valuable, the most sought after, it was the four-wheel drive vehicles. Of course, food and fuel, but if people had had the vehicles, they could have gotten the food and fuel. I think the police department, looking back on it, wishes that they had had more four-wheel drive vehicles, not necessarily that belonged to them, but just had tabs on it. They knew where they could get them in a hurry. There was no plan set up ahead of time on 20 vehicles that you could get at a moment's notice, and I think that's one thing that they wish that they had been able to do. Along those same lines, there really was no organized disaster plan in terms of CB groups, in terms of any four-wheel drive vehicle groups like the Trailblazers. And perhaps in the future they will get organized, a little more organized, so at a moment's notice all of these groups can communicate with each other. In this blizzard a few days ago, they were operating somewhat independently, although towards the end of the blizzard they began to organize a hotline and they began to kind of communicate with each other. But I think They learned an awful lot of this. They also learned that these vehicles are available. They are around. They just didn't know where they could get them until really Friday when the winds had let down. One more thing on that note, we were talking about fuel, this Project Heat, which has been so valuable for people in wintertime. They could not get the vehicles to make Project Heat work, and they regretted that.
They had no way of delivering. They had the fuel, they just couldn't get it out to people. So what they're talking about perhaps is rectifying that situation then.
Yeah, and again, it's not so much purchasing them, but just finding out where they can be gotten in a short period of time.
Stan, the Weather Service obviously did a fine job alerting people, but I suppose we can learn lessons too from what happened.
I'm not sure, but I think Mother Nature is trying to tell Indiana something. Last year, we had the coldest January on record. It was the most severe winter from the standpoint of snow and cold. This year now, we've experienced the storm of the century, consecutive years. Maybe residents of Indiana and the constituted authorities are going to have to begin to think in terms that the people in Minneapolis and Fargo and Bismarck and some of those northern communities do, that we are in for winters unlike what we've had up until the last couple of years. This would be in line with your discussion of the four-wheel drive vehicles, people stocking emergency necessities at home so that they'll be prepared in case they are cut off from outside help. We should tip our hats to the people at the telephone company, just all of the individuals who kept going under the most severe and adverse conditions. But I personally would like to thank the National Weather Service. They supply us with a basic raw material. We take the ball there and run down the field, hopefully to score the touchdown, get the word out to the people. And the ladies and gentlemen at the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Indianapolis, they got a 4-star reading from me on this one, I'll tell you.
People in the rural areas, you're talking about making sure enough provisions are on hand when winter comes, especially out there because they have no way of knowing how soon they're going to get relief.
Right. If we get an ice storm or something, the power's cut off, most rural folks, myself included, have to pump their water electrically, and if the pump goes out, we have no water. So we'll think in terms of having an emergency supply of water on hand, naturally fuel supply, whatever type that we have stored in our own home. Canned goods, I don't know what the situation would be as far as perishable. Eggs will only last so long no matter how much you stockpile them. But we're going to have emergency food on hand at home in case it's, a week or 10 days before people can get to us out there in the outlying areas. And in town, too. It's not going to be a bad idea to work up an emergency weather package of goods and materials and medicines and things like that at home and expect the worst. Expect that you may lose electrical power for 24 hours. Your phone may go out. Your furnace or your heating system may go down. You may not be able to get out the front door in an apartment or a home. Just think in those terms and kind of salt something away in the closet.
So when the warning comes, they'll be ready for it.
Be a squirrel, I guess.
Gene, you talked today to some of the authorities downtown. There's a real controversy about this curfew that was called by the mayor, not so much because he called it, but what happened to the people who violated that curfew?
Well, they were all let off. The prosecutor's office today said they cannot prosecute these people because of the mayor Hudnut did not send the declaration to the county clerk's office and because it was closed. And so all the people, they cannot actually prosecute them unless that law is changed. I think we ought to get into the cost of this, Mike. I think it's impossible to measure how much the storm cost us in the way of man-hours lost. But it cost the city a little over $250,000 to clear the streets. Now, that's out-of-pocket cost. Now, the federal government, Mayor Hudnut told me that the federal government is picking up 75% of the contract work. If he had known that beforehand, he would probably contracted more of this work out. But see, they did not. They learned something there that the federal government in an emergency such as this will pay 75%. It won't pay for the city's overtime. It won't pay for the city's salt and sand that they had to put out, but it would pay for any contract work out. So I think next time, if an emergency is called, that they will certainly contract more work out to get some of the load off the city.
Okay, Gene, Carol, Stan, thank you. We'll all be back with a final word in just a moment.
He knew becoming a pharmacist wouldn't be easy, that he'd work hard for his degree. And with all the new medicines and new formulas, he'd have to keep on learning. So he still goes to class to stay up with the changes, or sits at home reading up on the business of good health. After all, his customers put their trust in him. He has to work a little bit harder to keep that trust. If he didn't, he wouldn't be a Hook's pharmacist. If it's important to your health, it's important to your Hook's pharmacist in green. This is a family-sized bottle of a leading brand of mouthwash. And this is a family-sized bottle of Hook's own mouthwash. The leading mouthwash keeps your mouth feeling fresh for hours. Hook's own mouthwash also keeps your mouth feeling fresh for hours. This is the breath you get with their mouthwash. And this is the breath you get with our mouthwash. Maybe you can't tell the difference here, but you can tell the difference here. Hook's own brands. Quality that's guaranteed at a price you can afford.
So we have faced the worst that Mother Nature has to offer, and we're returning now to what might loosely be called a state of normal here in central Indiana. Indiana plowed and shoveled and sweated and, yes, we even prayed at times through the blizzard of 1978. It was a time of tension when perhaps even panic hid behind every snowdrift. The blizzard of 78 was not easy for anyone. It made heroes of some people. It made heels of others. But sharing the tension and the trouble brought out a spirit of togetherness among neighbors that restored a Hoosier tradition that is so often missing in modern times. And it reaffirmed another tradition that goes back to our beginnings, too. Here's News Director Lee Giles. Lee?
Thank you, Mike. It took a team of television professionals, these folks and a lot of others, to cover the big storm and bring the story to you. A team of individuals who worked alone and a team who worked together under the most grueling, difficult, dangerous, almost impossible conditions. If we succeeded in getting you the information you needed, it was because of our people, dedicated, willing, and hardy enough to cope with whatever was handed out. In a business that's often thankless, sometimes the only satisfaction is in a job well done, and maybe that's more than enough. But we should tell you we think that they have our thanks, and apparently the thanks of a lot of the public, too. So from our lonely transmitter engineer, Ken Garvik, who spent 72 straight hours at his snowbound outpost in eastern Marion County, here are the people of Channel 8 who brought you the picture of the blizzard of 78.